Forsaken Rescue. The silver light of distant stars barely penetrated the thick atmospheric haze of Lyria, casting ghostly shadows across the barren landscape. Tyron Vex adjusted his breathing apparatus and squinted through the visor of his expedition suit. 6 months of solitary mineral surveying on this forgotten moon had taught him to appreciate the subtle differences in the endless gray terrain. His scanner beeped softly, alerting him to an anomalous reading just beyond the ridge. Probably another deposit of worthless ferrit, he thought, but protocol demanded investigation of all signatures. Hauling his pack higher on his shoulders, he trudged over the uneven ground. What he found wasn't ferrit. A sleek, oval pod lay half buried in the loose soil, its metallic surface scorched from atmospheric entry. The design was unlike anything in the colonial registry, too elegant, too seamless. Tehran approached cautiously, his pulse quickening as the pod's side panel slid open with a soft hiss. Inside lay a woman, her skin the pale blue of distant nebulae. Her features were almost human, yet subtly different, more refined, with delicate patterns tracing the curve of her neck and disappearing beneath her torn flight suit. Blood the color of twilight seeped from multiple wounds. "Can you understand me?" Tyron asked, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, iridescent silver irises focusing slowly on his face. She whispered something in an unfamiliar language before losing consciousness again. Tyron's medical scanner revealed critical internal injuries. Without intervention, she had minutes, perhaps seconds. The nearest medical facility was 3 days' journey away. He hesitated, knowing what saving her would cost him. His regenerative capabilities were his most closely guarded secret, the reason the Mineral Consortium had sent him alone to this desolate place. Every time he shared his healing energy, it took months to recover fully. "Damn it all," he muttered, removing his gloves. Placing his hands gently on her wounds, he closed his eyes and focused. The familiar warmth flowed through him, invisible tendrils of energy seeking damaged tissue, knitting cells back together. Pain lanced through his body as he took her injuries into himself. Hours later, he awoke in his shelter, weak and disoriented. He had somehow managed to transport both of them back to his small outpost. The woman lay on his cot, her breathing steady, wounds closed to faint scars. Tyron slumped against the wall, exhaustion dragging at his limbs. He had given too much. As darkness claimed his vision, he felt cool fingers brush his cheek. "You are bound to me now," she whispered in perfect standard. "I am Nilara, and by the laws of my people, your life is joined with mine." As consciousness slipped away, Tyron wondered what kind of salvation or damnation he had brought upon himself in this lonely place between the stars. Tyron woke to find Nilara studying his collection of mineral samples, her slender fingers tracing the crystalline formations with unusual precision. The morning light filtering through the shelter's translucent ceiling cast prismatic patterns across her blue skin. "These contain quantum resonance properties your instruments haven't detected," she said without turning. "On my world, we would use them for navigation calibration." "And where exactly is your world?" Tyron asked, wincing as he pushed himself upright. His body felt hollow, drained. The regenerative process had taken more from him than ever before. Nilara turned, her silver eyes reflecting light in mesmerizing patterns. "Far beyond your charted space, Surveyor. My people, the Lyrians, have avoided contact with younger species for millennia. Then what brought you here?" He reached for a hydration pack, his hands trembling with weakness. She crossed the room in fluid motion, taking the pack and placing it in his hands with unexpected gentleness. "I was guardian of the Stellaris, an ancestral vessel of immense power. The hegemony, what you would call pirates, they came for it. I managed to launch the ship into hiding sequence before escaping. And crashing on my doorstep," Tyron finished. "A fortunate collision of fates." A smile touched her lips. "You gave me your essence to heal me. Do you understand what that means?" Tyron shrugged. "I did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "What you did was extraordinary. And by the sacred laws of my people, it creates a bond, a life debt that cannot be broken." She knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. "I claim you as mine, Tyron Vex. Where I go, you go. What is mine is yours." "I'm not interested in your cultural obligations," he said, pulling his hands away despite the curious warmth her touch ignited. "Once you're fully recovered, You can signal your people. My people will not come, she interrupted. But the Stellaris can be recovered. Its hiding sequence would have brought it to the third moon of this system. Tyron laughed bitterly. That's Sentinel territory. Heavily guarded, impossible to breach. Not for us together. Nilara's expression grew intense. The bond we share now. It creates capabilities beyond either of us alone. I can feel it pulsing between us even now. Something in her words resonated with Tyron. He could feel it too, a subtle connection, like an invisible thread pulling them together. It was unnerving yet somehow comforting. I'm not leaving my post, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Nilara moved closer, her scent like distant starlight. You saved my life. Now let me save yours from this empty existence. Her hand brushed his cheek, and Tyron found himself leaning into her touch despite his better judgment. The Stellaris can take us beyond the reach of whatever you're hiding from. Her perception startled him. How did you— Your eyes betray your past, she whispered. No one chooses solitude on a forgotten moon without running from something. Their faces were inches apart now. Tyron felt drawn to her in ways that defied explanation. Was it the bond she spoke of, or something more primal? Before he could decide, the shelter's alarm blared. The proximity sensors had detected approaching ships. They've found me, Nilara said, eyes widening. The hegemony never abandons a hunt. Tyron's decision was made in that moment. My transport has enough fuel to reach the third moon. If we leave now. As they gathered essential supplies, their hands brushed repeatedly, each contact sending currents of awareness between them. Whatever mysterious connection had been forged when he healed her was growing stronger, pulling them into an orbit neither had anticipated. Celestial voyage. The Stellaris wasn't merely a ship, it was a living entity. As Tyron and Nilara approached the massive vessel hidden within the crystalline caves of the third moon, its surface shimmered in recognition. Patterns of light flowing toward Nilara like an eager pet greeting its master. She remembers me, Nilara said, placing her palm against the seamless hull. A doorway materialized beneath her touch. Come, the hegemony scouts are only hours behind us. Inside, the ship defied conventional design. Corridors shifted and reshaped themselves as they walked, the interior responding to Nilara's presence. The bridge emerged around them, a circular chamber with no visible controls, just a central platform surrounded by a translucent field of swirling energy. How do you pilot this thing? Tyron asked, mesmerized by the constantly shifting patterns. Nilara took his hand, sending a jolt of electricity up his arm. We pilot it together. She led him onto the platform. The Stellaris responds to consciousness, and our bond amplifies the connection. Standing together in the heart of the ancient vessel, Tyron felt the ship's awareness brush against his mind, curious, evaluating. Then Nilara stepped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, her body pressed against his back. Close your eyes, she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. Feel the currents between us. Direct them outward, into the ship. Tyron complied, suddenly aware of every point where their bodies connected. The energy that had passed between them during the healing now flowed in reverse, creating a circuit of shared consciousness. Through this connection, he sensed the ship's systems, propulsion, navigation, defenses, all responding to their unified thoughts. The Stellaris rose from its hiding place, accelerating smoothly into space. On the view screen that materialized before them, 3 hegemony pursuit craft appeared, weapons charging. They're targeting our propulsion matrix, Nilara said, her arms tightening around him. Acting on instinct, Tyron directed their shared energy toward the ship's defenses. The Stellaris responded instantly, deploying countermeasures that scattered the enemy targeting systems. You're a natural, Nilara murmured appreciatively, her lips brushing against his neck. The contact broke Tyron's concentration momentarily, and one of the hegemony blasts grazed their shields. The ship shuddered, throwing them against the console. Tyron found himself catching Nilara, their positions suddenly reversed, her body beneath his. For a heartbeat, they remained frozen, faces inches apart, the battle momentarily forgotten. Her silver eyes darkened with an emotion Tyron recognized but was afraid to name. We should, he began. Yes, she agreed, but neither moved. The ship jolted again, breaking the spell. They scrambled back to the controls, working in perfect synchronicity now. The Stellaris danced between enemy fire, its ancient weapons devastating two pursuers while the third retreated. As they entered hyperspace, the immediate danger passed. Nylara turned to Tyron. Without words, she closed the distance between them, her hands finding his face. "The life bond demands honesty," she said softly. "And honestly, I have wanted to do this since I first saw your face." Their lips met, hesitantly at first, then with growing urgency. The connection that had been building between them exploded into something more primal, more demanding. The ship's lights pulsed in response, creating a cocoon of shifting colors around them as they surrendered to the inevitable. Later, lying together in the captain's quarters that the ship had generated for them, Tyron traced the luminescent patterns on Nylara's skin, watching them brighten at his touch. "Where do we go now?" he asked. Nylara's expression grew serious. "To end the hegemony's pursuit once and for all." She hesitated. "Their leader. I know him. Varric was once my intended mate." Tyron felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Would you have come if I had told you we were flying into the heart of the hegemony to confront my former lover?" She propped herself up on one elbow. "The bond between us is stronger than any prior connection. I need you with me, Tyron." As the Stellaris carried them deeper into unknown space, Tyron wondered if the warmth he felt for this mysterious woman was the magical bond she described, or if he was simply falling in love with her, in the most human and vulnerable way possible. The hegemony's central command floated like a twisted crown at the edge of the Carina Nebula. Its jagged architecture, a fusion of multiple conquered vessels, reflected the cobbled-together nature of the pirate collective itself. From the Stellaris observation deck, the fortress looked both impressive and obscene against the backdrop of stellar beauty. "Tell me about Varric," Tyron said, breaking the silence that had grown between them since Nylara's revelation. Nylara's fingers traced patterns on the viewing glass. He was brilliant, a visionary who saw the stagnation in Lyrian society and sought to change it. Her voice softened. "We were to be bonded in the traditional ceremony, but his methods grew more radical. When the Council rejected his proposals, he stole experimental weapons technology and disappeared. And became a pirate king," Tyron finished. "He prefers revolutionary," she said with a bitter smile. "The Stellaris was the final piece he needed, a vessel of the ancestors, capable of reaching dimensional spaces our modern ships cannot access." Tyron studied her profile, searching for signs of lingering affection. "And now you're going to stop him?" She turned to him, her silver eyes unreadable. "The Stellaris must be kept from him at all costs." "That doesn't answer my question," he pointed out. Instead of responding, Nylara stepped closer, sliding her hands up his chest. "The bond between us grows stronger by the hour. Can you feel it?" He could, an invisible current connecting them, growing more insistent with proximity. When they touched, it hummed like a perfectly tuned instrument. When they made love, it became a symphony that resonated through the ship itself. "You're changing the subject," he murmured, even as his body responded to her nearness. "Am I?" Her lips brushed his jaw. "Or am I reminding you where your allegiance should lie?" The phrase triggered something in Tyron's memory, a fragment of conversation he'd overheard while drifting in and out of consciousness after healing her. Something about securing his allegiance and the perfect conduit. He gently disentangled himself from her embrace. "What exactly happens when we confront Varric?" A flicker of calculation passed behind her eyes. "We negotiate from a position of strength. The Stellaris gives us leverage. And this bond between us, what role does it play?" The suspicion that had been forming in his mind solidified. "You said I'm now connected to the ship through you. Am I just a battery for your ancient technology, Nylara?" Her expression hardened. "Our connection is real, Tyron, but it also serves a purpose. The Stellaris requires dual pilots of complementary energies in combat mode. My people evolved to form these bonds naturally, but finding compatible matches became rare. You and I, our resonance is perfect. So you needed me to power your weapon," Tyron said flatly. "Was seducing me part of the strategy too?" Pain flashed across her features. "It wasn't like that. What's grown between us is—" She reached for him, but he stepped back. Is what exactly? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been manipulating me from the moment I saved your life. The ship's sensors chimed, interrupting their confrontation. A transmission from the hegemony fortress. Varric's face materialized on the view screen, strikingly similar to Nilara's species but with sharper features and eyes of deep crimson. His expression shifted from surprise to triumph when he saw them. "My beloved Nilara," he purred. "You've brought me the Stellaris after all, and with a compatible human battery no less." Impressive efficiency. Nilara's posture stiffened. "This isn't what it appears, Varric." "No?" His smile widened. "Then perhaps you haven't told your human pet about the final phase of the bonding process. About how one consciousness must eventually subsume the other to achieve full weapon potential." Tyron looked at Nilara, searching for denial in her eyes, but finding only conflict. "He's twisting the truth," she said quietly. "The merging is temporary consensual." "Is it?" Tyron asked. "Or was that detail also being saved for later?" Before she could answer, the fortress fired. A blazing lance of energy that rocked the Stellaris. Alarms blared throughout the ship. "Critical decision time," Varric announced. "Surrender now, and I'll allow your human to live as my personal servant. Resist, and I'll extract what I need from both your corpses." The view screen went dark, leaving Tyron and Nilara staring at each other across a gulf far wider than the physical space between them. "I never intended for it to happen this way," she whispered. "What began as necessity became more. You must believe that." Another blast hit the ship, stronger than the first. The shields wouldn't hold against a third. Tyron felt the bond between them pulsing with urgency, demanding action. Despite his anger and sense of betrayal, he couldn't deny the connection that had formed, whatever its original purpose had been. "If we fight," he asked, "who controls who in this merging?" Nilara's answer would determine everything. "Convergent stars. Neither," Nilara said, holding his gaze. "True power comes from harmony, not dominance." She extended her hand across the divide between them. "I won't force this. If we merge, we do so as equals, or not at all." The ship shuddered under another assault. Warning lights bathed the bridge in crimson. Tyron hesitated, every instinct screaming caution. Yet beneath his anger burned the undeniable truth. In the short time they'd known each other, Nilara had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead. Connection, purpose, perhaps even love. He took her hand. The effect was instantaneous. The bond between them flared like a newborn star, their consciousnesses rushing toward each other. Tyron braced for obliteration, for the loss of self Varric had warned about, but instead found expansion. His awareness merged with Nilara's, yet remained distinctly his own. Two melodies intertwining to create a more complex harmony. Through her eyes, he witnessed the ancient history of her people, their rise and eventual stagnation. Through his, she experienced the harsh beauty of human resilience, the determination to survive against all odds. Together, they understood the Stellaris as neither could alone. The ship responded, its systems reconfiguring to their unified command. Weapons platforms emerged from hidden compartments, targeting systems locked onto the hegemony fortress, with precision impossible for single-mind navigation. "Impossible!" Varric's voice crackled over the comm. The ancestral texts spoke of balanced merger as theoretical only. In their shared consciousness, Tyron and Nilara moved as one, directing the Stellaris in an intricate dance around the barrage of enemy fire. Each maneuver flowed perfectly into the next, the ship becoming an extension of their unified will. "What we have," they spoke in unintended synchronicity, "you could never understand, Varric. You seek to dominate, to consume. That was always your failure." The Stellaris unleashed its primary weapon, not the planet-killer Varric had sought, but a targeted pulse that struck the fortress's command center with surgical precision. The hegemony's shields collapsed under the assault, secondary explosions blooming across its surface. "Surrender, Varric," Nilara's voice emerged distinct from their merged state. "End this pursuit. Find another path." The response came not as words, but as action. The fortress's remaining weapons concentrated into a desperate final strike. The energy beam lanced toward them, too powerful to evade completely. In the split-second decision that followed, Tyron acted on instinct. Within their merged consciousness, he shifted the protective balance, channeling the brunt of the impact away from Nilara's essence and into his own. The pain was excruciating as the energy tore through his portion of their shared awareness. He felt himself fragmenting, consciousness scattering like stars across an expanding universe. The last thing he registered was Nilara's anguished cry as she felt him slipping away. Then darkness. Light returned gradually, pinpricks of sensation resolving into the soft hum of medical equipment. Tyron opened his eyes to find himself in an unfamiliar chamber, its architecture flowing and organic. Nilara sat beside him, her luminescent patterns dimmed with exhaustion. "You nearly died," she said, voice raw. "Your consciousness was dissolving. I had to break our connection to save you." "Varek?" He managed to ask. "Gone. The fortress was destroyed in the final exchange." Tyron tried to sit up but found his body unresponsive. "The bond, I can't feel it anymore." Sorrow shadowed her features. "I severed it. It was the only way to prevent your essence from being lost completely." She touched his face gently. "My people have one unbreakable law. Life bonds once formed are eternal. To break one is unthinkable. I am now clanless, nameless among my kind." The magnitude of her sacrifice struck him. "You chose me over your entire identity." "I chose love over duty," she corrected. "A very human decision according to your memories." A smile ghosted across her lips. "Perhaps we've changed each other more fundamentally than any bond could force." Over the following days, as Tyron slowly regained his strength, they navigated their new reality. Without the bond, they were separate beings again, the easy synchronicity gone, replaced by the more mundane challenges of two individuals learning each other anew. "Where will you go now?" he asked as they stood on the observation deck watching the stars. "The Stellaris is yours to command. The universe awaits." Nilara turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the cosmos beyond the viewport. "The ship can be piloted by one, though not to its full potential." She paused. "But I've grown rather fond of having a co-pilot. Even without the bond?" "Especially without it." She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. "Now we choose each other freely, with no ancient biology or mystical energy compelling us." Tyron pulled her into his arms, marveling at how right she felt there, even without the supernatural connection they'd shared. "Besides," she whispered against his lips, "who says we can't create a different kind of bond? One of our own making." As the Stellaris carried them toward distant stars, Tyron realized that the most powerful connections weren't those forged by obligation or cosmic accident, but by the simple, profound decision to remain together when all forces of the universe offered the choice to part. In the vast emptiness between worlds, they had found something rarer than any ancient vessel, a love born of free will, stronger than destiny itself.